All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me for this introductory class. This is an opportunity for me to both speak about the upcoming Essentials course, but also just introduce heart and soul centered astrology and offer some teachings and perspective for how I look at the natal chart and really what this is all about. Because the degree to which, the way in which we understand life, our cosmological perspective on reality in the first place, is going to determine how we interpret and look at everything. So for me to kind of speak about what the natal chart is, how you could use it, what it's all about, we have to sort of take a step back and ask the more fundamental question, what is this life? Who are we? What's going on here? So I'm going to start with that, and then I'll move into a little bit of an intro. In this class will be in total 1 hour, and I'll give some space before that hour for just some questions and answers. And you're welcome to type in the chat box at any point if you want to chime in or raise your hand. So we think about this question, who am I? And we start with the premise and the experience of we don't need to be very philosophical. We don't need to be super conceptual. We definitely don't want to be abstract or inaccessible. But we all can identify the experience of saying, well, I am a father. I am a partner. I am a man. I am a human. We're familiar with identity linked to a specific context. And yet we know that all of those things aren't essentially defining of who we are because all those things go. So if sense is defined by something ephemeral, it's left in this ambiguous non-existent state. So we look into the question, who am I? And this is where I would define how I use the word soul. I use the word soul a lot. So what do I mean when I refer to that? Basically, if you take the body, personal memory, conditioning, identification with anything within time, space, reality, personal context of your human existence, you take all of that and you put it aside, what's left is you, the soul. And we can be synonymous with the idea of soul and you. I can speak to you and we can have this sort of underlying agreement that says, okay, yeah, we're referring to this particular construct of self, this human form, and the whole world that I've built upon myself, the caterpillar that eats its leaves and does its thing. But I could also be saying you and referring to what's behind the scenes, what's central and eternal and consistent throughout all changes. And so most souls, most of us, identify and predominantly know ourselves according to the temporal conditions. So you ask the caterpillar, who are you? And the caterpillar would be like, what do you mean? I'm a caterpillar. I eat leaves and I poop and I crawl. I'm gooey. These are all the things that make me me. But we know the inevitable destiny of this particular being. And so what is it? Is it a caterpillar? Is it a butterfly? The extent to which we're identified with the conditions of life means that consciousness, our being, our beingness, is constantly in this position of needing to adjust and accommodate to, wait a minute, I was this. I was defined by this relationship or by how I make you feel or by this job or this social status or this security or by being seen or knowing myself in a certain way. And that's not happening right now. So on this evolutionary journey, which I would simply define as the journey of the soul, the journey of our beingness, waking up to remember itself. Maybe you're a caterpillar, maybe you're a butterfly, but you are not inherently defined in an internal sense by any of those constructs. So on this evolutionary journey, this journey of beingness, of soul, remembering what it is, we all take these different forms, these different expressions. And a principle here that I find to be very true, very real in my own experience, is we need to play it out. We need to be fully in. Caterpillar needs to be fully in. It can't bypass the experience. There's a certain reality to the journey, to the process that we need to live through. And then everything has to be exhausted. So we can think of life in some sense of everything is either on its way, happening right now, or on its way out. Astrologically, this is actually very similar to just the energy of, cardinal, fixed, mutable, the three different modes in astrology. And the flow of life, the flow of evolution, which is kind of impersonal, meaning it's not following the plan of our preferences, how we want things to be. It means we're always moving into a stage, playing it out, or completing it. And then something else forms. But along that journey, we're learning more about who we are. Our attention gradually shifts further away from the attachment to what eventually will go. The deep concern with gain and loss. And that concern with gain and loss is kind of at the heart of suffering. Concern with getting more, concern with losing what we have. So our attention shifts further from that, and it can abide more fully in what we are, in the essence of our own being. Now, there are two principles that I want to speak to, and then we'll jump to the natal chart. First, when I speak about these concepts, my prayer, my desire, my devotion is to never allow truth or understanding of the truth to become so conceptual that it's like a belief system, right? That it becomes something, well, it's a belief system, or it's a construct, or it's a modality. On my own journey and working with so many people, I find that actually Adam Gainsbourg, my first teacher in 2005, looked at my chart, said to me, Ari, the greatest truths are the ones most simply spoken. And that has become a mantra and a guiding force and a deep teaching for me throughout my whole life. Because if it's true, if it's real, then it also must be very accessible to our own human experience. It must be alive for us. We must be able to directly experience it and know it. And this is a Sagittarius Gemini axis, right? Sagittarius is your understanding of the truth, our cosmological perspective and understanding of reality, which is never complete. We're always growing and learning more and coming to a deeper understanding. And then Gemini isn't, there are different truths, but rather there are many ways to articulate it, synthesize it, organize it, intellectually put it together, communicate about it, learn about it. And for me, the need to stay very open and fluid to the direct experience and the inward looking, and to communicate and explore these ideas in ways that are more and more true for our actual lived experience. And that's a part of why I call my work heart and soul centered astrology. It's about the soul, but for me, the heart is that place where there's empathy and where there's understanding, where there's an appreciation and a respect for the tenderness and the complexity of this life journey that we're all on. So here are two concepts that I want to bring forward, and this is so foundational to how I work with the chart. My partner Michelle was recently teaching me this Buddhist concept of the two arrows. So there's the first arrow, which is the arrow of suffering, human life experience. And then there's the other arrow that we add to it with our own thinking, our own resistance. So I want to speak to my perspective on this. There's also that Buddhist teaching, the first principle, that life is suffering. So here's how I think of this idea. It's not that life is suffering that's like inherently you're supposed to suffer as some sort of like, yeah, this is what you paid for. You signed up for that. I'm sorry, you shouldn't have bought the ticket. Go somewhere else. There's a different principle where it's not about suffering. To me, it points to understanding the nature of karma. Now, we often think of karma as this idea of cause and effect. And I would say that the reality of cause and effect obviously depends on time and space. You can't have cause and effect without time and space. The manifestation of all of our life experience within time and space corresponds to the specific karmic reality that we are coming into. Now, the question I want to ask is, why do we have the karmic reality that we come into? You're born into this body, this family, you have certain experiences. There's a significant degree to which we cannot control life. Try as hard as you want. There's a certain level of reality that we cannot control. We can't control our fate. We can't change the tide of the ocean. In other words, we can't change our karma. So the way that I interpret karma, and thus the way that I understand the total human experience that we come into, it's the template of our life. It's unalterable. You can't willfully change your body right now. You can't change your past. You can't change the conditions of the life you were born into. The way that I understand this in my own inner looking is that our essence, what we are, is love. And love isn't defined by time and space. It doesn't require context. It's not looking for something. It's not seeking outside of itself. It doesn't have conflict. And love being the starting point, love being the premise, right? The original beingness of what we are. Every impulse to be not that, every desire born from the open field of possibility to seek something other than what is, to seek other than our inherent wholeness. And our inherent wholeness is one, meaning it's not like you're whole and I'm whole. It's like we're whole. Oneness is itself. And there's this profound mystery of free will and desire, and that a soul can generate desire to want to know itself as other than what it is. And this desire creates a focus point of concentration on world, on experience, on time and space. It creates time and space. It creates separation. It creates the experience of separation. It creates other. It creates, there's somewhere to go, there's something to do, somewhere to be other than here and now. It creates this whole reality of there is an evolutionary journey of discovering and remembering myself. And it's very similar to if you take a bunch of string and you tie it up in a knot. To unravel that string, you got to start at the point that's accessible and work your way backwards. And that's how I see this journey. Our unique karmic reality, where we are, what we've created for ourselves, is unalterable. And it's something to be respected, meaning it's a mystery that our conditioned minds can't totally grasp. We don't all have the perfect and clear awareness as to the underlying why behind our life experiences. And it's not necessary to probe so deeply and understand everything. We don't have to think about it in terms of past lives or whatever, but to appreciate that everything that arises is simultaneously the effect of where we've come from, and at the same time, the point of return. Everything that arises represents inherently 100% the template from which we are unraveling, kind of going backwards, taking where there is a belief in other and separation, and using that as the template for our ongoing return and self-remembering. So we can really think of all of life and the deeper truth of what we can call karma, cause and effect, the physical conditions of our human life experience. At the core, a very compassionate and loving reflection 100% of the time for where there's an opportunity for each one of us to remember, to return to love, and to the practice of forgiveness, the practice of taking full responsibility for our inner reality. And this notion of taking full responsibility doesn't mean, oh yeah, I deserve to be abused. It's not about that. And this is where these spiritual concepts can become so alienating and confusing and hurtful. Taking full responsibility for our inner reality and all of our life experience is to have the practice of orienting back to the starting point of, okay, everything that arises in my life is a reflection and a starting point for my path of return. This doesn't mean we necessarily have the absolute and complete awareness of what the teaching is. Actually, sometimes it means we won't know this and we just have to go through, and that's the first arrow. You can't change your karma. You can only start in the present moment and cultivate consciousness, awareness, and love. The unalterable reality of karma is something that's very humbling, right? It shapes the unique conditions of each soul's journey, and we learn to yield to it. So I was just meditating by a creek earlier today, and you spend time by the water and you remember, okay, that's the teaching. You have to just yield to the contours, the banks that allow for the flow of return. And then there are periods where the water might get stuck in a little crevice and it gets funky and bacteria begins to grow. You can't necessarily force yourself all the time, 100% of the time, into a state of peace and flow. It's a practice. And a part of the evolutionary journey is we come into this moment relative to the degree of self-awareness that we've established prior to this moment. And so we're only as aware as we are. But this is where desire, such a fascinating piece, desire in my thinking, in my learning, is sort of this free agent. Desire is the choice, the consciousness we bring into any moment that determines how we are choosing to be in response to it. And so one of the teachings that Jeffrey Wolf Green, my teacher, has taught, which I deeply appreciate and respect, is at the core of each of us are these two antithetical desires reflecting the nature of our own free will. Our free will isn't going to determine the karmic reality of our own soul, the conditions of time and space that are happening for us. It is. The only place where free will manifests is in the present moment. The degree to which we are orienting from the seat of our true being or orienting from the seat of identification with conditions. And so these two antithetical desires within the soul can be described as the desire to return, the desire to evolve, the desire to cooperate with the unraveling of the knot, with the return of love. And thus that contains and reflects the ability to take full responsibility for one's own well-being, to cultivate a deep inquisitiveness and commitment and devotion to knowing the truth of who one is. And that becomes like a penetrating force of concentration where we learn to concentrate on the soul itself. We learn to concentrate on what we are, not what comes and goes, not the gain and the loss. And this won't mean everything opens up. It's that degree of concentration, our cooperation with evolution, with the flow of our own journey of return, shapes our circumstances in harmony with the quickest route possible. And even then, we can't control that. There's a relationship on our journey of awakening, of remembering, between choice and grace. We can't control the conditions that arise and how all this stuff goes. Doesn't matter how great of a manifester you are. Ramana Maharshi has the quote, it goes something like, try as hard to make what won't happen and can't happen to happen, and it never will. Try as hard to prevent what's destined to be, and you will never make it so. This is all, in a sense, you can say a dream that we're choosing to manifest within, to remember and unravel and discover who we are beyond the dream. It's a dream of time. It's a dream of bodies. It's a dream of space. It's a dream of other. It's a dream of the world. And this doesn't mean negating it or denying it or pushing it away. We have to be in it. We can't spiritually bypass our karma. And I really want to just offer this idea of karma in a loving way, not a, oh, I have karma. But we can't go beyond it in the sense that you can't not be in your body. You can't have the life that you're living right now. But desire is that free agent. It reflects the inherent sovereignty and power of each soul to know itself as one with its creator. So we have that immense power that we can apply in essence, truly in any moment, to earnestly want to know ourselves. But then the other desire is the resistance, the desire to separate. And that desire to separate reflects in a deeper and deeper investment in what we're wanting to control. You're some famous newscaster and there's some kind of scandal about you and everyone's talking about you. And so identity is threatened. It's like, oh man, it might have been very evolutionary, a lot of growth to come into becoming a famous newscaster. Right? It's everything's growth. All experiences they're all growth. That's what evolution is. You don't just skip to the absolute. Everything at the core is an experience that provides more knowledge, more reflection, more understanding of ourselves. So you became that famous newscaster and you learned more about yourself. You found more power within. Great. But then there's that scandal. And so there can be this strong identification with how you are seeing the power, the position that you've gotten. And now all of a sudden, you're not willing to grow and evolve because identity is really strong. Identity follows desire. The fixation of soul, the fixation of pure being, of consciousness, to experience and find power and meaning outside of itself gives birth to identity. Right? I'm attached to being adored and loved and liked. Gives birth to this is a human experience that I'm going to cultivate and focus on and create for myself as a vehicle to fulfill that desire. And that's not bad. It's what we're doing. And again, we just have to know how to let go of it when it's time to let go of it. And this could be a very compassionate and loving opportunity for this being to own their mistakes, face the humiliation of maybe how people are seeing them, and thus exhaust the old desire. They might find a new way of being, a new way of knowing themselves beyond this threshold. So that's the first arrow. Life can be difficult. We each have a unique set of circumstances. You can call it assignments. Calling it assignments can be a very loving way to think of it. When you think of it as assignments, it provides a very compassionate perspective. Assignment is a lesson that you get to learn, And the nature of time and space is such that it's going to show up infinitely as much as we need it, because the primary reality isn't time, isn't form, isn't space. And so we get to manifest conditions as long as they're necessary. One of the teachings, and a just reminder to everyone to mute yourself, because I'm hearing some background noise. One of the teachings in A Course in Miracles, which I'm a disciple of, is the purpose of time and space is to learn how to use it purposely. So to think of all of this life, all the conditions, which includes our unique karma, the template of our human existence, at the core is just here for our learning, for our remembering. Thus, we have to remember that there is nothing arbitrary in our lives. There's nothing that isn't a reflection of our inner reality, of the nature of our desire. And there isn't anything that doesn't serve the potential and the possibility of furthering our own self-awareness. So as a part of the evolutionary journey, we'll have that chrysalis phase. And that's a part of it too. Very often we come from a particular form, a particular construct. We've known ourselves in that. It's who we've been. You can say maybe 5 lifetimes you've been doing the famous thing. And at a certain point, maybe that served a function, and when we're growing, when we're evolving, and we're finding value in our experiences, it supports other people as well. And then you get to a point where it's time to bring that to exhaustion. There can be a lot of trauma in that. We can say it in a different, you could have had experiences of lifetimes of not being very empowered, lots of abuse, not connecting to your own authority, right? And there's evolutionary juncture where enough is enough. Whatever it is, whether we're the ones in power or the ones being disempowered, they're all just experience. They're all just reflecting a state of consciousness. They're not just happening to us. That's why we really want to understand and hold this idea with compassion and care when we work with people, but really there are no victims. On a very relative level, an individual might not be able to hear that, and it may not be helpful to say that. But on a soul level, there aren't. Everything is relevant to our own evolutionary growth. The key is to understand where's the healing. There are no victims isn't useful if we also don't have the adequate compassion and awareness to understand where's the healing right now. Where's the growth that this is offering to me? Moving into more empowerment, more clarity, learning about boundaries. We're going to learn about all things time and space and how to do bodies, how to do relationship, how to do money, how to do purpose. We're going to have all these lessons happening within the 10,000 things of creation for as long as it's needed. It's all just a template for our remembering of who we are. And so this period of ambiguity of chrysalis, it's like the snake when it sheds its skin, it can't see. There's something to that. In this period in between forms, identity isn't fixed somewhere, but we haven't yet found the new form, the next stage of evolutionary growth. And in every stage of evolutionary growth, we have to set up shop, and that's Saturn. Saturn corresponds to this principle where we are not just doing this thing and kind of getting it done as quickly as we can, but like, I'm not going to eat any food or put clothing on because like, I just want to get through this whole human thing, put food through the IV. Like, we're not doing it that way. The caterpillar is a caterpillar. Like, it's doing its thing. We have to do our thing. So Saturn is how we learn to accommodate and fully make ourselves available and fully present for the conditions of time and space that are relevant to our growth at this time. Understanding it as that really helps us think of Saturn in a less materialistic way, much more in a spiritual way, much more in a way of this is where I'm learning to gain mastery and conscientiousness, attunement, self-knowledge in this human experience. And as we evolve, the Saturn conditions, the form, the structures of reality will also change accordingly. So the rules that we each have to play by, the unique parameters and limitations of our soul journey are very different for each one of us. To the point where even gravity, nothing's a rule, like the rule, set in stone. Right? Nothing's the rule, everything is a rule. There's nothing in time and space that is universally, absolutely what has to be for everyone. Everything in form is specific for our purposes, even gravity. And there's a shared momentum where we're all kind of working through similar levels of consciousness, learning lessons. We all come into this form. Any being on this earth for the 99.999% of the time will be sharing this sort of collective momentum. And so we're reflecting each other, right? Our own journeys, because it's all one, right? But there are beings that I deeply believe in this world that, they can fly if they want to, do all kinds of things. And I just say that to really emphasize that all the limitations and constructs that are relevant for each one of us are just relevant for each one of us. As we evolve, as our consciousness shifts more and more to itself, towards the soul itself, the necessary conditions, the parameters within which we are to learn change. It's very similar to a child that might need more rules and thus harsher consequences in its learning because it needs to be protected. You don't cross the street without an adult holding your hand. And if you do, it's important that the adult really make sure this kid learns. It's really important this kid gets the message. You never do that. But as this kid grows, now they're 37, they don't have to follow that rule anymore, right? Most of us don't. I'm sure some do. Like, literally, just, obviously no example is a perfect example because actually some adults will need that support. But in a general sense, we can think of all kinds of examples in our lives and collectively where at a certain point of maturation, the boundaries shift. And so spiritually, in very practical ways, the conditions of our life shift as our desire shifts as well. So my teacher, Jeffrey Wolf Green, who taught the evolutionary astrology paradigm that I am trained in, that I've been teaching and practicing for many years, he would teach that desire is the program for this life. It's the bottom line. It's Pluto corresponds to the nature of desire, right? And it also corresponds to DNA. It's the DNA, it's the genetics of the conditions of the life that we come into. And from that, we can have context to understand the unique Saturn conditions, the time and space, the moon, the emotional identity construct that we've come to establish. So when I'm looking at a chart, I'm looking at it with respect to this understanding. I'm never looking at a chart and being like, yeah, here are your strengths and weaknesses, and this is where things are going to be really challenging and really hard for you. Um, and yeah, just what it is, or this is the kind of relationship you need. I always want to bring it back to the soul's journey. I want to bring everything back to the remembering of the love that we are. I want to be in touch with the gem that's underneath all of our human experiences, pointing us to this profound beauty, ineffable expression of beingness that we are. And then when we touch it, we're filled with unconditional love. We're filled with awe and wonder and deep reverence and respect for who we are in life. As we remember ourselves, there's a deep respect and appreciation for the entire journey that we've walked. I've never met anyone who's awakened or has gone through a deep awakening that doesn't bow to their life experience. I once went on a retreat with someone who said, I would do all this again. And when I heard that, I was like, what? Like, what? But we do. That's the trick. Like the extent to which we don't wake up, we repeat. Time and space will continue to show up for us as long as it needs to, in whatever ways it needs to. And again, there's a lot of compassion and patience in that. So when I look at the chart, I'm thinking of it in terms of what are the unique conditions of this soul's journey. I actually think of the chart on 3 levels. So level 1, the natal chart speaks to the nature of the soul's consciousness, the desires that are latent within the soul, and thus the unique karmic reality that has shaped this life that the soul has come into. Understanding it from that level means I'm appreciating that this human life that we've come into has a reason. It's a chapter. It has context. It's not arbitrary or coming out of nowhere. And thus, level 2, I'm able to then determine and understand what is the evolutionary potential? Where is the possibility of growth and remembering and a return in this lifetime? And to understand that is a matter of appreciating that your body, your family, the unique conditions, the people that come and go, it's all given. It's all written. The script is written. It's in the stars. It's written. It's in your DNA. Your beingness, your path of return is one with the life that arises for you. It's a profound principle of faith for me. And so I look at everything in your life and I get to know, I'll have people share what's happening in your life, what's happening for you, what's present, what's real. And I'll take that in. And the prayer, the attunement is, how is everything pointing back to this journey of return? So I use the language of the astrology chart to understand that. And then the third level is kind of off the chart. Like you can have this objective understanding of what the chart speaks to, but the third level is actually saying, okay, I'm going to be speaking to a soul who right here, right now is vibrating in presence with me. You can't interpret a chart without context and connection to the soul itself because the chart reflects the reality of the soul. Astrology is not causative. I can't talk to someone and be like, oh, Mercury is retrograde, therefore it's going to cause you this, or it's doing this, or you are this way because you have the moon in Scorpio. I have to be able to access and connect directly to the human intimacy and the empathy and the appreciation for how the chart reflects. What does the moon in Scorpio reflect about your soul journey? And so we understand, like, what's the moon represent? What's that about? What's Mercury represent? What do all the planets in the chart symbolize within consciousness? And how does it all reflect your journey? And this is where you are right now, because we all have the same chart our whole life. Like we have our body this whole life. And so the chart is the conditions that the soul has established for itself relative to where it's at. And it doesn't think about it. It resonates with the Tao. The Tao manifests conditions. I use the word the Tao to just describe the nature of oneness manifesting and living and flowing. The conditions of our life, they manifest, they blossom effortlessly on our own because everything is in reference to love. All ideas, all concepts, all identities, all desires are actually all relative to the original nature of being, to the love that we are. And so the Tao manifests all conditions as a reflection of our own natural unfolding and unraveling back to source. Again, I really think of it as like a backwards process. If at a certain point we decided to hate, the Tao will effortlessly manifest conditions to meet that hatred and heal, to forgive. Everything that arises is just the undoing, unraveling, and the returning. So we have the same chart our entire life, but we're growing, we're evolving. And so when I'm looking at a chart, this third dimension is to actually go outside of the chart and feel the soul. Where are you at right now? 10 years ago, I had the same chart, but I was operating on a different level of consciousness. So it's necessary when we read the chart that we're attuning to the sovereignty of the soul in its own ongoing evolutionary journey. You can look at a chart and say, okay, your destiny is to fly and suck nectar, but you're still a caterpillar. Like you can't look at a chart and know if you're looking at a butterfly or a caterpillar. These archetypes can manifest on various levels of consciousness. So we have to really work with the individual. So, Jeffrey Wolf Green in the evolutionary astrology lineage has taught this very important principle, the evolutionary stages of the soul. And it's just this way of appreciating that you can have 3 charts, 5 charts, 10 charts, all the same, but reflecting different karmic realities. And how is that so? It's because the chart, the archetypes of the chart, all the symbols can manifest on various levels of consciousness. So you could have a soul operating through a particular realm of desire. Take, for example, Aquarius. Aquarius is a sign. Every sign in astrology is a domain of consciousness. So when you're looking at a sign, you're looking at a style. You can think of the zodiac, the 12 signs, as 12 slices that you're putting onto existence. Existence is whole and undivided, it's oneness. Now you're taking that and you're putting archetypes on top of it. Now, if you take out one of the slices, you're looking at an archetype that manifests fractally on every level, every size scale, every dimension of existence. And it weaves through time and space, but it's not defined or dependent on time and space. So you take out the Aquarian slice, you have, the nervous system, neurons, communities, friendship, the idea of technology, the idea of alien, the idea of alienation. You have a whole bunch of physiology. You have a whole bunch of social conditions. Psychologically, Aquarius has all kinds of correlations. So all of those things will manifest in every area and dimension of our life. On the level of psychology, you can look at Aquarius and say, okay, for many souls on this planet, Aquarius, which as an archetype corresponds to liberation, innovation. For many souls, that will mean you're living in a more consensus reality, your mainstream religion. You follow what mainstream culture, mainstream media tells you to believe in. You pretty much adopt the belief systems that you grew up with. You're identified with the conditions of culture and time and space, like many, many souls are in any part of the world. And maybe Aquarius will reflect the capacity to innovate and find new ways of thinking, but within that box, right? So we can have the Tea Party, which was any time you have a group of people getting together based on shared interests, that's Aquarius, because Aquarius symbolizes the natural emergence of community, ecosystems. So we could have the Tea Party, which in the United States was sort of an offshoot of the Republican Party, a group of people that didn't identify with Republican values, and so kind of created this sort of subgroup of a political movement. That's happening within the consensus state, meaning their values are still defined by consensus reality. It's not necessarily about more inclusive ideas of giving and sharing, support for minorities, support for those that don't fit into the mainstream hetero white Christian cultural, story. But it's still Aquarius. It still represents a group of people resonating and innovating, making a change, improving upon something to reflect their own individuality. In the same way, the Aquarius archetype on a more spiritual level of consciousness, meaning for souls that are on a different stage of evolution, not a judgment, just a fact. That archetype would represent something else entirely. It can represent a soul that's learning to liberate from conditioning itself. And so they'll be cultivating a spiritual practice of noticing the difference between a story and what's actually true. In Aquarius, we learn that this present moment, this is great because we have Jupiter and Saturn entering Aquarius right now. So this is a very much awake in the collective. We learn that this present moment has nothing to do with the past. The past actually represents conditions, time, space. That's Saturn, Capricorn. And so there can be this profound spiritual awakening and realization in Aquarius where we realize my nature, myself, my individuality isn't defined by the past, that I am what I am created to be. A tree isn't a tree. I'm calling it that, but it's actually an archetypal expression of divine intelligence. Like we could have that awakening in Aquarius of seeing everything as an archetype, seeing everything as the thought of God, thus impersonal. And actually the soul has a certain Aquarian level of awakening. There are different stages of samadhi, different stages of spiritual awakening. And one of them, in the way that I think of it, is that stage where we realize that my beingness, my individuality is not my personality. But the soul has its own individuality that reflects its unique beingness, its nature as it is created to be. But what we are created as is not what we can know or define or possess. Like our beingness is inherent to what we are, and it's one with the ecosystem of life. So you can take all the archetypes, all of the signs, all of the elements, and really see how they can express and manifest and even show an evolutionary journey of ongoing realization and growth at every level of consciousness. Sagittarius can be the idea of religion. Sagittarius can also be this direct experience of truth, where it's not about a belief system or a book or a philosophy, but the journey of the soul to have a direct experience. But a lot of souls will be operating in Sagittarius through the realm of wanting to adopt to a philosophy or a belief system that reflects someone else's experience. But within that, they're going to grow. They're going to have their own revelations and growth, but within a particular construct. So when I work with a person, it's very necessary that I slow down and listen with my heart, right? Really feel where they're at so that I can serve their growth, so I can serve their own evolutionary journey. And, the prayer that I hold within every time I meet with someone and every time I teach, the practice that I always come back to is that this is healing for me too. Because the truth of what we are is oneness. There's no evolutionary journey happening in a vacuum. When I return to love, it's actually the recognition that we're all here together and that we're all sharing the same journey. Sort of subjectively different curriculums, but it's one return, it's one remembering, it's one awakening. So to really feel the empathy and the connection, the sameness of my journey with another, even if it's just totally different context. So those are the 3 levels that I employ when working with a natal chart. Now, what I want to do is shift to talk a little bit about the course that I'm going to be teaching. Let me just pour myself a little water. And I want to invite any of you, if you have a question on anything that I've shared, anything that feels curious to you, you're welcome to chime in the comments or unmute yourself right now before I move on to this next piece. I'll say first that, okay, you know how I think of astrology. You have a sense of my perspective of life and what this is all about. Why am I teaching it? Why am I actually creating a training program where I'm teaching people to read the chart, to learn astrology from the ground up? You know, this training program is designed for both anyone who's completely new to astrology. So you may have not ever worked in the realm of Mercury, Uranus. Maybe you know nothing about houses and planets and signs. Or maybe you're very practiced in it already, but you want to sort of take a step back with solid guidance with someone that you resonate with to train the mind in thinking of the chart from a heart and soul perspective. Why am I doing this? So, to be honest, I've taught many courses. I've taught many evolutionary astrology courses, really just teaching the evolutionary astrology technique and paradigm that I learned from my teacher. The last course I taught was in 2015. I've taught other courses with other astrologers and collaborated with other teachers over the years as well. I've always had a deep resistance to doing what I'm now doing because my fear has been that if I'm going to teach a course and really savor it, really go from the ground and really teach my own realizations, I'll find out that I'm a phony. I'll find out that I don't actually know, that I'm just making all of this up, that I'm a fake. And this kind of points back to a deep part of my own healing. It's actually Chiron. You know, Chiron in our charts often reflects this area where there might be a feeling of brokenness and deep tenderness and vulnerability, but we're called to do it. And in doing it, we learn compassion and humility, and we become available and bring forth medicine that we wouldn't if we weren't in touch with our own tenderness. So I have Chiron and Taurus in the ninth house being the teacher, Taurus being self-worth, self-esteem. So I've been kind of avoiding that for a long time and just kind of playing it small. You know, getting enough clients to survive, teaching some one-off classes every once in a while. I've had small groups, but to really say, okay, I'm available. Here, come. I'm available to teach and really nurture this holy learning journey. To do that means that I'm actually looking inside and honoring and respecting the profundity and beauty of these teachings. That I'm really committing myself to cultivate direct knowledge and to find the teachings within my own life, to look inside as if for the first time. To be opening the space to teach means I have the opportunity to heal, to learn, and to remember with all of you. So my intention, my prayer, and how I'm creating this course is I'm full in. I'm full in. I'm blocking my schedule for the next month pretty much just to focus on creation content. And my prayer in this creation is to be giving deep attention to all the teachings and to teach as if I'm in the same way that you teach a child with so much care and patience. You know, there's a sense of awe and appreciation for them learning how to do things. I want to learn how to see myself in that way. I want to cultivate this perspective, this attitude that sees my own journey as held in this profound sense of compassion and love. And I don't feel there are a lot of astrology courses that give adequate, and this is just my own observation, that give adequate time and experience to really get grounded in the essentials, right? So it can very easily happen that we feel lost or alienated or like we're too far behind. I want the basic understanding, the deeper spiritual conceptual understanding of all the signs of all the planets to feel like that's the essential piece, to know how the natal chart is constructed, to understand the basic astronomy of the natal chart. That's helpful too, to know what we're looking at. So this course is taught in 5 segments. Each segment has its own set of video material. And I see there are some questions, so I'll tune into that in a moment. Each segment has its own set of video material. So all the content's taught through pre-recorded video. And then within each segment, we have live meetings. The live meetings will be anywhere from 1 to 2 to 3 or 4 times per segment, depending on how much content is in the segment. So for example, the first segment, and it's released on Sunday, January 10th, is just 1 week. And we meet that Saturday for a live Q&A. And each segment will have practice questions and review questions, practice assignments. Nothing's obligatory, right? If you don't want to do that, you don't have to. But I'm creating it to nurture a space of real companioned learning so that every step of the process is guided in a very solid way. And I'm going to have all students get into probably pairs, maybe triplets, with other students that are similar levels of knowledge. So you can practice and do the assignments together. And it's going to be a lot of application and review. Segment 2 is the zodiac, and that is 3 weeks. And so we'll meet twice for that segment. And a lot of it's going to be deepening and practicing our conceptual understanding of the signs in our own life. And then we learn houses, and that's applying it. Okay, what's Pisces in the second house? Houses are areas of life experience. Feel that. Lots of practice conditioning the mind, learning how to read signatures. What's Pisces in the second house? Take the opposite, Virgo. Virgo's opposite Pisces. What's Virgo in the second house? What are the differences? Then we'll go into segment 5. By the time we get there, those are the planets. I'm giving 4 or 5 weeks to just the planets. We'll put, okay, Mercury in Pisces in the second house. Mercury is communication, language, how we learn, how we intellectually organize things. What are the communication needs here? Really explore it. Now, we're not going to be interpreting complete charts yet. To do that means learning aspects. To do that means, great to see you, Emma. Thank you. I see all the comments here, so I'll get it to in a moment. To do that really means learning how to cultivate an understanding of how all the planetary energies synthesize and work with each other. That we'll do in part 2, the chart interpretation course, which comes up later this year. So the essentials course is getting all the basics, all the ingredients, so we're stable, we're grounded. If you want to be trained as an astrologer and you want to go all the way, start with the essentials course. If you just want to get the knowledge, the spiritual perspective of these archetypes that are universal, just do the course. Don't go on to the next level. So I don't care what the reason for your studies are. I'm just honored and grateful to get to serve and share this. It's a course, but it's also a spiritual study. It'll bring healing for all of us. So let me look at some questions, okay? Thank you all so much for joining me. When you talk about the course, can you speak to why a person might choose to take your course if they have already studied the basics? Yes. There are a few people that have already studied the basics. They've even taken courses with someone else, but they're still choosing to work with me. And then there are a few people that have decided on their own that, no, this is not for me. I've studied very deeply the basics already. I'm going to jump in at the second level. I respect each person's decision. The reason why a person would choose to take the essentials course is because they resonate with what I'm bringing forward. And they feel there's value in slowing down, starting over again, and receiving solid guidance from the ground up with a teacher that's been doing this for many years that they trust, that they resonate with. So it's simply a matter of that. So it's a matter of each individual deciding for themselves. You know, I've been studying on my own for many years. Maybe I've taken a class, maybe not. Do I feel there will be spiritual benefit for me in starting over again with a teacher and receiving the gift of guidance? And some might feel, I feel pretty good in this, but I want more support with interpretation work. That's the next course. How do we interpret at a later time in life and a new stage desire falling away? Yes, okay. The falling away of desire is natural, and it's just a part of the ongoing evolutionary journey. And when desire falls away, it could be very empowering. It could also be very disillusioning. We'd have to understand context. But the nature of desire falling away is simply this process of it doesn't have any fuel. Every desire has been relevant for a time. When we fulfill a desire, it means we've gotten what we needed out of it. Desire also corresponds to the symbology of sexuality. We desire, we want to have sex, we want to murder, but what's happening? You're never actually going to get there. It's like in desire is this interesting experience where you never actually merge with this thing outside of you, but you're accessing something inside. We're connecting more deeply to the latent power that's within us. So we go through the experiences of desire. We go through all the phases, and there's a certain point where it's like, yeah, I really cared about, you know, you gaining your approval, being wanted by you, where I really cared about, being a successful teacher. Now it's like, I don't care. So if whatever we care about, we're going to build identity around it. If I care about being a successful teacher or knowing and having knowledge, I'm going to be identified with knowing, which means if I don't know, I might be insecure. I might be afraid to say I don't know, which means I'll create circumstances where I can practice knowing. And I'll also have these experiences where maybe life will reflect to me where I don't know. And that might be an evolutionary catalyst to admit, oh, I don't know here. And there might just come a point where it's like, you know what? I just want to play music. It's just a thing. So how do we interpret at a later stage in life? Is there anything more you want to say to that question, Jesse? Because I'm wondering if I'm answering what you're asking. You can unmute yourself if you'd like.
I haven't defined desire. I feel like this past year has been exquisitely about learning and receptivity to this science, a different view on the world because of identity with the soul. But work has fallen away. My career has passed. Trying to restart something just doesn't occur to me. It seems like it's more self-study.
Thank you. Yeah, and that can be a very precious experience. Again, it could be disillusioning because our conditioned self and our memory is like, well, I've been this, all these things. But when evolutionary timing says you're done, we just have to be open to that and see what's there, see what comes next. And that's the part where it's like whatever's next will emerge. It'll arise on its own, and we'll be drawn towards it, and we can just follow that. Yeah, thank you. That's that chrysalis period that we all go through, which can be deeply disillusioning and scary, or it can be a deep resting. It's a yin phase, and actually we repress the yin a lot. We're very much in culture, and even in spiritual culture, there's a lot of like, do the work, evolve, work. But there is for sure a real period in all of our journeys cyclically that's very yin, of needing to rest and fall away and go inside and let the old fall and not know, to just kind of be receptive to the unfolding. When I face somebody's chart, I tend to see first the difficulties, and it takes me time to find how and where is the evolution key. And I find that astrology has limitations as far and where I am now. These limitations is how to take real actions to live better incarnation. let me see if I can understand. I know it's not your first language. Um, Christiane, are you speaking about how to work with the limit, how to help people with the limitations in their chart? Do you want to articulate what you're asking? And I'll give
Yes,
this class another good 10 minutes or so I can answer these questions.
yes, Ari. Uh, I'm French mother tongue, so maybe
Yes,
it's difficult for you to understand. I'm sorry.
no worries.
Yes, my question is that when I study a chart, it seems that first I see the real difficulties and not the good things. And then it takes me time, and I'm trying to find the key to really help myself first when I look at my chart and see now where is the key that not think that it's all disaster. uh, for instance, now I'm going through my south node. um, do you understand what I'm
I
saying
am,
with my
yes.
accent? Okay, because of my accent, and I'm trying to find my way. I'm going through I have the south node in the Capricorn sign.
Yes.
Yes. And so I had Saturn, and Pluton is close to my south node. And sometimes I say, oh, I understand why it's so difficult. And many things I see, oh, I understand why it's so difficult. But I want to find a way to see what's the evolution behind it, what's the treasure, what's the present, what's the good thing about it. And not like, now I know Pluton is 24 degrees and my south node is 27 degrees, and I say, oh, it's going to go forth, backwards, retrograde until 2026, and sometimes it's scary. So if you understand what I'm saying?
I do. Thank you.
Okay, so that's when I read a chart of somebody else, I don't want to have this type of negative view. Okay, I hope you understand.
I do. That brings me to 2 points. One, we can't control our karma, right? So for those that don't know Pluto on the south node, just anything, any example, any situation, you have Saturn conjunct Venus, and people can say, oh, this means I have tough luck in relationship and love. Or, a certain Pluto is moving over a hard part of your chart. That means I'm going to experience a lot of death and a lot of loss. And the purpose of our life experience, of course, is never to punish us. It's never like suffering is never useful on its own. And so the first piece is acknowledging there's a template, there's a flow of the unraveling to life's journey that we cannot control. And yet there's also this ongoing calling to be in conscientiousness of how we are in relationship to it. Where's our desire? So this is where we come back to the choice to cooperate or resist with evolution. Our resistance is the second arrow. It's where we create unnecessary suffering and pain and misery. And that's actually what keeps us circling in time and space and the challenges that repeat themselves over and over and over again. But to cultivate the sincere attitude of wanting to know who we are. And the way in which we all will do that will be different. When I work with an individual, I'm not going to necessarily speak in the same language, because it's about what's the ongoing evolutionary growth? Where is there the possibility for self-awareness? And when I think of the idea of healing, it's bringing back the mind to a place of wholeness and intimacy with truth, not being divided within ourselves. And so we can see a whole bunch of seemingly hard things in a chart. And this actually brings me back to the question, are some charts harder than others? Yeah, kind of. But that doesn't matter, because the unique trajectory of a soul's evolutionary journey is just what it is, and it's to be respected. whatever is hard in a chart in terms of like squares and oppositions and things like that, or if you have a lot of planets squaring the nodes, that can symbolize a challenge. And the soul might actually construct a period of years of its life, an entire Saturn cycle, just for playing out a particular karmic reality, so it can then be exhausted. Very, very often, it's just designed that way. And we just have to follow it and be where we need to be. And there's often a limit to the extent to which we can cultivate more awareness than we're able to in the moment. But it's like the moment we think, could I be more conscious here? The moment that question is birthed is the moment where we could be, is the moment where there's more potential for growth that otherwise wasn't available prior to the birthing of that possibility, of that thought in our mind. So yeah, it's all about just bringing people back to the empowerment and the potential for healing and remembering that it's at the core of our life experience. You can have an easy chart, so to speak, not a lot of challenging aspects, but not grow a lot. A lot of trines and sextiles and things like that, but not necessarily do the hard work. So it's really not for, and you could also suffer a lot. I mean, Venus trine Pluto is not necessarily easier than Venus square Pluto. Trines in general, and for those who don't know, trines are just a particular relationship between planets. We can be in resistance or cooperation at any level of expression, at any stage of the game. And so the work is to really just tune into what's the evolutionary intention, what wants to unravel, right? And that's the thing. It's like when we cooperate, we're not choosing or making up our destiny. We're following the flow of our own return. We're not in control of that. So our chart, just as much as it represents our unique karmic reality, it also represents the unique way in which we're returning to ourselves. It even sort of is ever pointing to the unique quality of awakened being. It's the way that we can inhabit and express ourselves when we're not in resistance. So what does it look like to see a Pluto that is empowered? That archetype is a unique soul expression that can come out for a soul as they do their work. And so, all this Capricorn stuff healing in your chart, anyone going through big Capricorn stuff, what that's going to do is going to be healing anything within the Capricorn archetype, within the Capricorn realm, that is deeply unconscious within your own conditioning. And any sign that's healing, any archetype that's in the healing process is going to bring its own set of challenges. Capricorn can be fear. Capricorn can be, I don't know how conditioned I am, dealing with shame, embarrassment, judgment, needing to go back to old stuff from the past that we've learned from society to purge it, to heal all that stuff. If you're going through difficult transits in Libra, it'll be more about the need to be liked. If you're going through strong transits in Aries, there could be a lot of anger. So these are all just sort of a natural, it's like these are archetypes. You can't change archetypes. We just have to yield to it and learn about it, learn about ourselves and flow with it. Let's see. Next question is, I've taken a basic course before, but don't feel that I have an in-depth understanding of each planet and how energies blend together. Just have a textbook understanding is hard to apply individually. Yeah, and you'll be taking this course with me, Iris. I'm very excited that I get to share that with you. Hello, Julia. Martha says, I've taken the full 5 modules of NPA course. So NPA, New Paradigm Astrology, I taught that with Kaipacha and other astrologers over 2 years. It's also from the ground up. I have a lot of respect and appreciation for the course, but I didn't feel it offered the level of depth and consistency that I would want to provide in teaching. But Martha, you feel called to start over again with this course because it feels like doing so will help me to become more fully aligned with my own inner wisdom and deeper connection with these energies. Thank you, Ari. Yeah. Christiana, how can we explain extreme pain and suffering besides soul growth? It's hard for the mind to accept when it cannot see. Yeah, that's the thing. It's like I can speak conceptually about these things, and I don't know. I don't know how to. If I'm with someone, I don't want to be anything but caring and sensitive and compassionate. We have to respect that yin space as well, just being in it. And since our journey is reflective of one another, the calling as a practitioner or as a partner or as a father isn't always to give an answer. Sometimes the answer is presence, is witnessing. And if that's what's needed for another individual, then that must also be healing for me. was we have to be really present and open-minded to how we can be in service to healing, and really cultivate. And it's a sensitive thing, and it's a big responsibility looking at charts with people, to learn how to not alienate others or say words that maybe aren't accessible. And it's something that I've caught myself doing many times. It's a big part of my own learning. And sometimes it is very hard if you're going through a Pluto transit and you're in this evolutionary window of snakes shedding its skin, and you just lost a bunch of things or went through a really hard period of time, and maybe you can feel that life is unfair, or that you've been hurt or abused or victimized, then you just have to be there. Sometimes the next step in healing is to feel it, and maybe for it to be witnessed. This is so important. It's so important. The chart speaks to the unfolding and the evolutionary journey, but if we're actually a really good astrologer, if we're really good, we'll also be able to recognize that the present moment healing is revealing itself to us in the present moment, and we'll be able to see that in the chart too, right? We'll be able to feel where a person's at and be able to grasp, okay, this is how to work with these symbols right now. We don't want to jump to an absolute level that isn't accessible. I'm so triggered. Oh, great. Yay. I'm so triggered by your question when looking at a chart. Where is the healing? To me, that would be the reason for learning more about chart interpretation. To me personally, it is the only valid question. Where is the healing? To me, that would be the reason for learning more about chart interpretation. Can you explain your question? I'm not sure how to say your name. Inga? I would love to hear your question. I'm not understanding what it is you're asking.
Oh, Ari, I'm sorry. It's not really a question. It's just enthusiasm.
Okay.
It's really me because I look at, I've been following astrologers and looking at charts, and, I love to work with the archetypes. I do different kind of work. But I feel the analysis of a chart to me is not so interesting. I'm always really interested in where's the healing. Like, I see all these situations, but where's the healing? So I was very triggered by your story, where it sort of becomes a whole thing, because it's just one thing. Sorry, I'm being really abstract now, but
Thank you.
Yeah. So to me, I have this question all the time. Yes, that's very interesting, that analysis, but where is the healing?
Exactly. When I saw the word triggered, I'm like, triggered, like, oh no. But yay. Because usually in the English language, triggered usually refers to like I was negatively affected by it.
Oh, so, no. Yeah, I see what you mean. But for me, it's like in Dutch. So
yeah,
that might.
I understand what you're asking. Thank you for what you were sharing. And that completely for me too. In fact, astrology has no meaning to me really inherently. Like, knowledge has no meaning to me. Understanding these things aren't important or exciting for me on its own. Healing is presence. Healing is love. Healing is connection. Healing is listening. And so for me, I only feel validity in doing this work and in teaching because I'm choosing to root myself in this perspective that this has to be about healing. And if it isn't, then I'll be depressed. It's like, when I first started teaching and when I first started giving readings many years ago, it wasn't about that. Maybe I had some conceptual understanding of that, but I would give a reading for 3 hours and just give lots and lots of information. And over time, I realized, you know what? Even if I don't know astrology, just coming into a space of attunement and caring is enough. And then you add even a little bit of astrology. This, by the way, is another piece, like practitioners that do other work, not astrology, but just want to add something to their work. Having this basic knowledge, if you look at a chart, maybe you don't know how to read the chart, but just having a basic archetypal understanding of the signs, just that alone, can be very helpful and insightful for just cultivating more compassion and empathy. I feel like I was in a caterpillar phase when I first met you, and you did my chart, and I'm in the midst of some sort of return, but now have just popped out of the chrysalis of the last 8 years. Thank you, Una. And Una, by the way, if anyone ever heard of the story Hope for the Flowers, it's a famous book about caterpillars. Uno was really involved in that book for many years. Validation is important in hard times. Yes, I feel like I need a more spiritual, intuitive approach than the MPA course provided, and I always resonate with your energy and approach, astrological interpretation. Thank you, Winter. Where do you place the heart in a chart? Okay, I'll answer that question. How do you say your name again?
Sorry, I had to.
Oh, now you're muted. Well, I'll answer your question. The heart, physiologically, the heart corresponds to the sun, Leo, and the 5th house. Mars corresponds to blood, and thus Mars conditions can also affect the heart, because we know that heart and blood are very much anatomically related. The heart chakra, and there are different chakra systems, but the one that I resonate with and work with, as taught by Jeff Green, corresponds to Venus, which makes a lot of sense. So you can also have heart issues that relate to the heart chakra that can even manifest physiologically, but it's a Venus thing, not a sun thing. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for joining me and allowing this opportunity to share about my work and this course. And one last piece for, if you don't know this, anyone who signs up for the course, I'll answer that question. It's a good question. Anyone who signs up for this course will also gain free access to my upcoming retrograde class series. So I'll be teaching that, I think, probably February or so. It'll be an 8 or 9 class series, and it's offered to all students of this course. So check it out. I'm going to send everyone a recording of this with a link to the course. If you have any questions, please feel free to get in touch with me. I have the payment and a payment plan, and just feel free to reach out for any reason at all. Thank you all. So much love to you. And this last question was, in the second course, will you also speak about phases? Yeah, the second course will be aspects, phases, and interpretive work. I'll just read one more question. I'm not sure if it's a question, but I'll read it. After my reading with Ari, I had 5 different personal spiritual truths that came out that I've been working with for the last year or so. It has been the gift that keeps on giving. I hope I can take the course, but wanted to drop this note of encouragement to anyone here. Thank you. This is knowledge, wisdom, and care. That would be a wonderful tool for any astrologer. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Okay. Bye, everyone.